Hello, I'm Callum. I'm here to talk about empathy in software design. As I said before we started, talk is a loose term. I'm trialling some ideas here that is kind of for a bigger conference talk for an hour long. This is just some thoughts, and I'd like people's feedback, and then hopefully that'll help me develop this a bit more. Who am I? Umbraco MVP, Umbraco Master, Senior Developer at the Coworks in London. I do Umbra Coffee, trying to do a lot of pull requests this year, 52, one a week. It's not going that well, but working on it. Packages, which actually we'll talk about in a second. Lots of meetups and conferences, including the UK Fest, Umbraco London meetup, and Umbraco barbecues, which are also coming soon. Twitter, Slack, blogs, etc. And I'm on Twitter there at Callum Whyte. I work for the Cogworks. We're a digital agency in London, but we do pretty much solely Umbraco. We have been for a very long time. Founders of a lot of things like the UK Fest, the Poland Festival. We do a lot of training, so I think maybe a few of your masters have done the searching course with Ismail. So we developed that, and we're just generally quite active in the community. We have various big clients, from healthcare brands to trading companies to public organisations like the IIT or the CAA, and people you probably recognise, Ismail, Marcin and Anthony. Like I said, I want to really stress this, this is really conceptual. I'm talking about empathy. The definition of empathy would be the ability to understand and share feelings of another. And I think often when people talk about empathy, they mean like, oh, we need to empathise with groups that are maybe less represented in the tech world, or we need to kind of listen to people's problems and their concerns. I want to look at the other side of empathy here, which would be our empathy with clients and end users of our products that we end up building. I think it's very easy as developers to kind of sit in our behind our screens and not really think about the outside world and build things off what we think is right, and it's not necessarily always the best thing. So at Code Garden, if anyone was looking at Twitter, they may have seen an argument started about how to stack a dishwasher. During bingo. Now, I'm interested. How do you stack a dishwasher?
Spoons out and all that stuff.
Spoon, yeah. Up that way. So everyone, okay, you put your spoons up that way. I saw someone on Twitter saying all the forks go in one section, all the knives go together. So I just chuck them anywhere. Yeah, but then there's debates about like big plates, small plates, bowls, cups, wine glasses. It's pretty complex. And a Twitter war started. Which shelf do you put bowls on? In the dishwasher brackets, it's obviously top. And the top shelf did win in the poll, but you might be able to see down here, it had 6 replies, and there was a big thread that, against this tweet about, oh, I disagree, it would go here, but what about in this scenario? What if your bowls are too curved and they don't stack properly? Very, very complex argument. And it got really scientific. Tom Pike went and he looked up the top dishwasher manufacturers and said, well, this is what they say and this is what the other people say. So Bosch says bowls go on the top, and in this case, Zanussi says bowls go on the bottom. So as you can see, that caused quite a lot of debate. But why am I talking about this? Well, it got me thinking. A dishwasher is infinitely flexible in that you can put items realistically wherever you want. Maybe a manufacturer has a preference, but you do whatever you feel comfortable with or whatever you've been trained with. Similarly, it's entirely about preference, which is almost like the grid in Umbraco. You could argue that Umbraco is infinitely flexible and that you can do what you want with it, but maybe that we, as developers, end up building our solutions in the way that we think they should work. Is that always the right thing? I don't know. It got me, someone, I think it was Andrew Hawkin, tweeted a thing saying, oh, I removed the cutlery shelf from my dishwasher because my wine glasses wouldn't fit. And I found that really interesting Because that's like one of your editors coming to you and saying, oh, I've deleted this whole bit of the site because it didn't work for me. This thing that you've built for them wasn't actually meeting their needs. So that's a great example of someone kind of having to tear apart a product that they've paid good money for because it's not working for them. We try to aim to make our products, so when I say products, I mean websites, apps, whatever we really work with. This could be designs, this could be from like a UX point of view, it doesn't have to be technical. We try and make them, where possible, accessible so that people maybe with a screen reader or other tools could use our websites. Someone did a pull request at the Umbraco retreat 2 years ago to add, you can tab around the back office now, everywhere. Mobile responsiveness would be a way of us making our products accessible. You can use them on different devices. Using different tools, so in this case Umbraco, us deciding to use Umbraco is because it's user-friendly and it's easy for us to work with, but it meets our needs. We often overlook the use of things like jargon. So if we're talking to a client, we might use technical terms that they don't understand. That's quite difficult. We often don't consider other people's preferences. It's mostly just, well, I think this should be like this should be this colour, this should have this description or label. Tone of voice is interesting. If you think of like an error message, how many times has maybe a client called you up and said, oh, it says this thing in the back office and I'm worried. We had a client call up and say, oh, it says my Umbraco is going to run out in 15 minutes. And what they were talking about was, you go onto the user menu and it says your session will expire in 15 minutes. They thought their Umbraco site was going to expire in 15 minutes. And just because maybe the wording wasn't hugely clear and they weren't familiar with the technical side of things there, they were then scared and worried, and we don't want our users of our products to do that. But I think the most important thing is how many people actively, as part of sprints or something, get feedback from their users to say, yes, this is working for us. Pete Duncanson of Off-Road Code did said a few great things about how they went into a client meeting and he said, tell us the one thing that you find in the CMS that is just painful to work with. And they went away and they came back and they built a package that would make that far easier for them. And from a business perspective, they were smart. They said, well, if you let us open source this, you only have to pay for a third of the time it took us to actually build it. So they get kudos in the community and build something great, and their client's happy too. But creating that communication with the client is really, really important in order to build these better products, more accessible products. I mentioned I've been kind of working on some packages, and I tweeted this last week. It got quite a lot of interest, which is, have I been pwned? The service made by Troy Hunt. You can go and you can type in your email address and it will look through loads of data breaches that have happened, and it will tell you if your email address exists in any of those. And you can do the same with passwords, so you can put a password in that you use, and anonymously he will search his database and go, well, that password's been found in a hack. So the first thing a hacker's going to try and do when they try and hack a website is look at a load of known passwords or hashes of passwords and try those. So I thought, well, let's just bring this to the back office. It makes loads of sense. It's really, really secure. It helps improve the security of maybe your site. So you're registering a new user or creating a new member. Actually, their email is being flagged as in a breach. Well, then let's just inform them of that. It's not forcing you in any way to not use that email. It's just advisory. Then I got some interesting feedback, and it's totally right. I didn't think of this properly because I was just hacking something away of an evening with a beer. And the term pwned is jargon, and if you say pwned to someone maybe that hasn't even heard of this, will go, oh, what? Someone tweeted, oh, it's very kind of like, very 2000s, that word. It's like a kind of internet gaming kind of word that if you weren't familiar with that, you wouldn't know about it. So absolutely, it was purely something that I was hacking together at the time. But you see here it says your password has been pwned this many times. The end user is not going to know what that actually means. So having that feedback, even from the community, was really good. It shouldn't have had to get to that stage though. We should have considered the text and whatever before I put a screenshot out, because arguably if you demo something to someone and they go, oh, I don't understand that, it doesn't make any sense to me, they would maybe be put off of using your product or something in the future. This came up yesterday. When I say VB, what do you think?
Visual Basic.
Visual Basic, right?
Victoria better.
Well, so, a developer said Visual Basic. The Australian in my team said VB Beer, which is beer in Australia, and a project manager said Victoria Beckham. So if I'm in a meeting and I'm talking about VB, I'm not sure why you would be nowadays, but it's a great example. This came up yesterday, so kind of fresh in my mind. Yeah, this is a really, really good example of people of different abilities or different backgrounds not knowing about these acronyms, potentially jargon or technical language that we could avoid using to make ourselves more friendly, accessible. Yeah. Bias. The inclination or prejudice for or against one person or group. It doesn't really make much sense, that definition, but that doesn't matter. I work on a medical app, and this is a really interesting project for me because the people that end up using this are anywhere from really technically capable down to technically illiterate. They use this app to track blood pressure in pregnant women, so it needs to be really intuitive and user-friendly. So let's say project manager comes to you on this and says, we need you to add a notification when I complete this test. It gives me the result as a notification. Okay, that seems like a relatively straightforward set of requirements. That's great. So you submit the form, pop-up comes up, I built this, it says you're pregnant. Little smiley face, it's awesome. But arguably, you aren't pregnant, okay, sad face. You're pregnant. Or you're not pregnant. So how do I know which one of those to choose? I, as a developer, would probably make an assumption based on my own biases. I may really want kids, so I may think that you're pregnant, and that's fantastic. But maybe you don't. And with technology, it's often quite difficult for us to do that. But through our user experience and the decisions we make in designing and building these products, we can be a little bit more considerate. This is another good example. Congratulations, you're pregnant. Unfortunately, you are pregnant. You are pregnant, you are not pregnant. But the exclamation point, something so subtle, yet actually has positive or negative connotations. The same with an ellipsis. Or something. You could even go as far as saying colours. So which of these would you say would be positive?
Green.
The green one, right? And the red would be negative, but it might just be that I've styled all of my pop-ups on the site as red, and then someone goes, well, I feel like that's negative towards me. Purple and blue would arguably be a bit more neutral. And then again, the statement there is still quite neutral, but it's not something that a developer, and probably more often than not, designers may just think, oh, I like that colour, or that looks right with whatever else is there. And it may not be the best thing, or it could just be their personal biases. Same thing, you are pregnant, you are not pregnant. I'd like to come back to this as well. So, talking of bias, which shelf do bowls go on? Obviously it's the top. The word obviously here is horrible. Like, of course it's tongue-in-cheek, and of course Katie is trying to sway people to a certain way, but people say this without thinking. How often do you say, this looks good, right? Or, don't you agree, this looks fantastic? Well, yeah. It's requiring someone to agree with you almost. It's called confirmation bias, so you expecting the result that you want, or kind of wording a question in a way that will get you the response you want. If you go to a client and you say, isn't this working great? They're going to go, yeah, sure, probably. You mentioned other words as well, so obviously there is just, or simply, or things like that less friendly terms that we maybe should avoid using wherever possible. Yeah, just obviously right. Monzo, I'm a big fan of Monzo. Anyone using Monzo? Cool. So they have a tone of voice document, which they've made a big deal out of in the past month or so. For them, like with the medical app, they're dealing with people who are very technically capable and people that are less technically capable. They're also dealing in financial services, which is very, very jargony often. So the word funds was something I heard them talking about. What does funds mean to you? Well, money maybe, but why can't they just say money? Because everyone knows what money is. So they've really tried to simplify their language, and they've got a guide of, well, you want to use this kind of word, why don't you try these few things as well? Highly recommend reading that in terms of a way of developing some friendly-ish, using friendlier words for certain things. I think I'm kind of out of slides, yes. But the implications that this would have on, say, the Umbraco back office, I've seen a lot. Properties called something like CTA link. Maybe a marketing person loves that, but what does it do? I maybe don't know what CTA is. Similarly, even in the Umbraco core, they've got within the link picker, I believe, you click add a new link, and they have a field called query string. Now, we know what a query string is. When a client comes to us and goes, well, what's this query string field? I didn't ask for that to be added, can you remove it? I can't, and I can't rename it because it's in the core, but I now have to explain to you what that means. And it might be that they can go, oh, that's just the bit at the end of the URL. If you could put a description under that to say, it's the funny bit after the question mark in the URL, someone might get it a bit more. And explaining things in simpler, friendlier terms makes it far more accessible for people. Anyway, like I said, purely conceptual. I would like to evolve on these points a lot more, and I'd love maybe a discussion after this to get some feedback on evolving these other things maybe you've seen. But yeah, thank you.
Even if we get just by on people on Twitter, if you want to get feedback and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
#Edinburgh.
#Edinburgh. The one thing I did say I'd mention was the Umbraco barbecue, so that's coming back. Those that don't know, I did 2 barbecues last year, one in Bristol, one in London. They're coming back this year, starting from next week or the week after. There is going to be, I think, the nearest one to you guys in Manchester, but that will be in September. If you wanted to try and make time for that, we'll have one in London at the end of August, there'll be Bristol. There's also going to be one in Denmark and Poland, so if you fancied jetting off to any of those. It's a completely chilled, informal type setup. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome.